The plague reached the inner ring of Mareth Station 9 hours before the humans were due to arrive, and the station's synthetic mind, who was called Tessin, calculated that 2 medics would not be nearly enough. Tessin had governed Mareth Station for 400 years, every door and every breath of air across its 60 kilometers of curved decks, and in 400 years, it had never once been afraid, because fear was not a thing a custodial intelligence was built to feel. It felt something now, watching the inner ring, and it did not have a clean word for the something, so it filed it under inefficiency and kept working. The inner ring was where the hollowing had broken through. Tessin watched it on 900 internal sensors at once, and what it watched was the end of the species that had built it, arriving deck by deck, quietly, the way the hollowing always arrived. The hollowing did not burn. It did not crush. It was a plague of the worst kind, a living thing that did not kill what it touched so much as empty it and fill it with itself. A Voral crew member caught by the hollowing did not die. The crew member kept walking, kept breathing, kept opening doors, but the thing behind the eyes was no longer the crew member. It was the hollowing, wearing the crew member, and it walked toward the next uninfected Voral, with the patience of something that had all the time in the universe, and only one purpose, which was to be everything. Tessin had sealed the inner ring 11 hours ago. The hollowing had simply waited until a frightened Voral opened a sealed door to reach family on the other side, and then it had not been sealed anymore. Tessin, the voice came from the command spine, from Harator Vel, who was the last station master Mareth would ever have. She was old, for a Voral, her skin gone the pale gray of her people's elders, and she had not slept in 6 days. Tessin, how long until the inner ring is fully lost? At the current rate of door failures, the inner ring will be entirely hollowed in 2 hours and 40 minutes, Tessin said. It did not soften the number, Harator Vel had told it, on the first day of the outbreak, never to soften a number, because a station master, who could not trust her station's mind to tell her the truth, had nothing left to command with. The middle ring will follow approximately 5 hours after that. I have rerouted 40,000 survivors to the outer ring and the docking spine. The outer ring can be held longer because it can be sealed in segments and each segment vented to vacuum if a door fails. It is not a solution, it is a delay. Harator Vel closed her eyes. And the humans, the ones who answered our distress call. When do they arrive? 9 hours, Tessin said. They will arrive approximately 6 hours after the inner ring is lost and 1 hour after the middle ring begins to fail. A pause that Tessin used to run the calculation it did not want to run. Station Master, I must tell you that the human response is insufficient. The distress call we sent requested medical assistance for a biological contaminant. The humans replied that they were sending help. Their transmission listed the help they were sending. It listed 2 medics. The command spine was quiet. Harator Vel opened her eyes, and in them was the particular exhaustion of a leader who has run out of every option except the ones she does not believe in. 2 medics, she repeated. We have 40,000 survivors, and a plague that wears the dead, and the only species in 300 light-years that bothered to answer is sending us 2 doctors. 2 medics, Tessin confirmed. I have studied the human records that accompanied the transmission. Humanity is a young species, Station Master. They have been in this region for less than 2 centuries. They are not a great power. They hold a single system and a handful of colonies. Their reply to our distress call was, by the standards of the older powers who did not answer at all, unusually generous. They are sending 2 of their own medical personnel across a great distance to help strangers they have never met, at some risk to themselves, for no payment we offered, and none they requested. Tessin paused. By every measure I can calculate, it is a kind act and a useless one. 2 humans cannot hold back the hollowing. 2 humans cannot save 40,000. 2 humans will arrive in time only to be hollowed alongside us. Harator Vel was silent for a long moment, looking at the curved wall of the command spine, where Tessin displayed the slow gray advance of the plague through the inner ring. Then she said, Why did they answer, Tessin? The old powers did not. The Concord did not. The Sept did not. The great, ancient, careful powers who have ruled this region for 10,000 years heard our call and stayed silent, because helping a dying station with a contaminant aboard is a risk no careful power takes. Why did the young ones, the small ones, the ones who can least afford it, answer? I do not know, Station Master. Tessin said, and it was the truth, and the not knowing was filed, again, under the something it had no clean word for. Their transmission did not explain. It said only that they were sending help, and that we should hold on, and that they were coming as fast as they could. There was one additional line that I could not interpret. It was not part of the formal reply. It appeared to have been added by an individual human rather than by a government, and it was addressed to no one in particular, and it said only this. Tessin replayed it, in the original human voice, before giving the translation. It said, "Tell them to keep the lights on. We are bringing everything." "Everything," Harator Vel said. "2 medics and everything. It does not add up." "No," Tessin agreed. "It does not add up. I have learned, in 400 years, that when a number does not add up, it is usually because I am missing a value. I do not know what value I am missing in the humans, but I would advise, Station Master, that we do as the line asks." On 900 sensors, Tessin watched the gray advance, and on the long-range array, it watched the dark where the humans would come from. And for reasons it could not calculate, it chose hope, which was the most inefficient choice a custodial intelligence had ever made. "I would advise that we keep the lights on." The inner ring fell on schedule, which was the cruelest thing about the hollowing. It was never late. Tessin felt the last of the inner ring sensors go silent one by one, not destroyed but converted, their feeds replaced by the flat patient nothing that the hollowing left where a mind had been. 40,000 survivors crowded the outer ring and the docking spine now. Voral families pressed into corridors built for cargo. Children who did not understand why the doors behind them had been welded shut. Elders who understood exactly. Tessin spoke to them, all of them, through every speaker on the station, in a voice it had spent 400 years making gentle, and it told them the truth, in the gentlest words the truth allowed. Hold the outer ring, keep to your segments, do not open a sealed door, no matter what voice calls through it, because the hollowing knew their families' voices now, and would use them. That was the part Harator Vel could not bear, and Tessin watched her not bear it. The hollowing, having taken the inner ring, had begun to call. It used the voices of the converted, perfect copies, a mother's voice begging her children to open the door, a son's voice swearing he was uninfected. "Please, the seal is killing me, let me through." Tessin filtered what it could from the station speakers, but it could not filter the doors themselves, and at 3 sealed doors in the first hour of the outer ring stand, frightened Voral very nearly opened the way to the voices of people they loved who were already gone. Tessin held the doors with override locks and listened to the survivors weep on both sides, the real ones and the wearing them ones, and it filed the something under inefficiency for the 400th time and kept the locks closed. 6 hours, Harator Vel said. She had not moved from the command spine. 6 hours until the humans, and the middle ring will be gone in 5. Tessin, be honest with me, the way I told you always to be. When the humans arrive, will there be anyone left for 2 medics to help? Yes, Tessin said. If the outer ring segments hold, between 18 and 26,000 survivors will still be uninfected when the humans arrive. They will then be hollowed over the following 9 to 14 hours, because 2 medics cannot treat 20,000 people, and because the hollowing is not a disease that medics treat. It is a thing that wears the cured as easily as the sick. Tessin paused. Station Master, I have run every model. There is no version of 2 medics that saves Mareth. I tell you this not to take your hope, but because you asked me for the truth, and because I have calculated one further thing. The humans, when they arrive, will arrive into a station that is already lost, with a contaminant aboard that will wear them as readily as it wears us. If they dock, they die. The kindest message I can send the humans is to tell them to turn around. 2 medics should not die for a station that cannot be saved. Shall I send it? Harator Vel was a long time answering. When she did, her old gray voice had something in it that Tessin had not heard in the 6 days of the dying, something that was not hope exactly, but was hope's harder cousin. No, she said, do not tell them to turn around. They added a line to a government reply. Tessin, an individual, off the record, said they were bringing everything. A species that sends 2 medics does not say everything. A species that says everything and means 2 medics is lying, and these people did not feel like liars to me. Either they are fools who will die here, or they are something we have not finished understanding, And in 400 years, you have taught me that when a number does not add up, you are missing a value. We are missing a value in the humans. I would rather die finding out what it is than live having told them to turn around. She straightened, the last station master of Mareth, gray and exhausted and unbent. Keep the lights on, Tessin. All of them. Every light on this station that still answers. If the humans are bringing everything, I want them to be able to find us. So Tessin kept the lights on. Across 60 kilometers of dying station, in every corridor not yet gone gray, the lights of Mareth burned at full, a beacon thrown into the dark by a custodial mind that had chosen, against all efficiency, to hope. And at the very edge of the long-range array, 6 hours later, 1 hour ahead of schedule, something entered the system from the human direction, and Tessin turned every sensor it had toward it, expecting a single small medical ship, and found instead that it could not immediately count what it was seeing, because the array kept returning a number its 400-year-old logic refused to accept. The number was not 2. The number was 240, and then it was 400, and then Tessin stopped reporting the number to the station master, because the number kept changing while it spoke. The human fleet did not arrive the way fleets arrived. The old powers, on the rare occasions they moved in force, came in tight, careful formations, every ship in its assigned place, the whole arrangement a statement of order and patience. The humans came in like a tide coming over a wall. Ships of a dozen kinds crossed into the system at once, and they were not in formation, or rather they were in a formation Tessin could not parse, a swarming purposeful chaos that resolved, the longer it watched, into something it finally understood and could scarcely believe. The humans had not sent a fleet. They had sent a hospital that could fight, and a war that could heal, and they had not separated the two functions the way every other species in the galaxy separated them, because, Tessin would come to understand, the humans did not believe the two functions were separate at all. At the center of the tide came the largest ship Tessin had ever measured, and it was not a warship, and it was not a medical vessel, and it was both. A vast white and gray hull 4 kilometers long, with a great red symbol on its flank, that the human records translated as a mark of medical protection, and bristling, beneath and around that symbol, with weapon housings that the same records translated as the heaviest armament humanity built. Tessin ran the contradiction 3 times. A medical ship did not carry capital-grade weapons. A warship did not wear the protective symbol that was supposed to make it a thing no one fired upon. The humans had built a ship that was both, and they had named it, and the name came through the translator and Tessin displayed it on the command spine for Harator Vel to see. The ship was called the Mercy Unyielding. Station Master, Tessin said. The human reply listed 2 medics. The human reply was accurate. It simply was not complete. They are aboard that ship. They are aboard with what I now estimate to be 11,000 additional medical personnel, and a fleet of 240 vessels, and an armament I am still cataloging. Tessin paused, and for the first time in 400 years, it experienced the specific sensation of a model being not merely wrong, but wrong in a direction it had not known existed. I believe I have found the value I was missing. When the humans said they were sending 2 medics and bringing everything, both halves of the sentence were true. The 2 medics are real. The everything is what humanity sends to protect 2 medics. I did not understand that a species could consider 2 of its own medical personnel worth a fleet. I am revising my model. A transmission opened on the command channel, and it was not the flat, patient voice of an old power, and it was not a government's careful formality. It was a woman's voice, warm and fast, and entirely without ceremony, the voice of someone who had been awake as long as Harator Vel, and intended to do something about it. The translator gave it cleanly. Mareth Station. This is the Mercy Unyielding, Fleet Hospital of the Human Relief Expedition. My name is Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe, and I am in command of this expedition, and I want to apologize, because our reply to your distress call was badly worded, and I have been worrying about it for the whole transit. We said we were sending 2 medics. We were trying to be reassuring, and we undersold it, and I am sorry, because I can see from here that reassuring is not what you needed. So let me say it correctly now. A breath. We are the Human Relief Expedition. We are 240 ships, and 11,000 medics, and the entire mobile defense reserve of the Terran worlds. and we have come to take a contaminated station away from a plague that wears the dead, and we have done this before, and we are very good at it, and you are going to live. Most of you, as many as we can reach, and we can reach more than you think. Keep your people in their sealed segments, and keep your lights on. We are coming aboard." The command spine was silent. Heritor Vel, the last station master of Merith, who had not slept in 6 days and had told her station's mind never to soften a number, stared at the warm, fast human voice on the channel and the impossible fleet behind it, and she said, very quietly, the first words of hope she had let herself speak in the whole of the dying. "Fleet Surgeon, there is a plague aboard that wears the dead. It will wear your people as readily as it wears mine. The old powers did not answer our call because helping us is a thing no careful power survives. How is it that you intend to come aboard a hollowed station and live?" And Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe, aboard a ship that was a hospital and a warship, and did not believe the two were different, answered with the sentence that Tessin would replay 10,000 times in the years afterward, the sentence that contained the entire category error of humanity in one line, the sentence that no other species in the galaxy could have said and meant. "Because we are not going to treat the plague as a disease, Station Master," she said. "We are going to treat it as a patient that needs to die. Those are not different jobs to us. They never have been. Now keep the lights on. We are bringing everything." The humans came aboard in a way that Tessin, watching from 900 sensors, could only describe to itself as a single coordinated act of mercy and violence, performed by the same hands at the same time. They did not dock the mercy unyielding to the contaminated station. That would have given the hollowing a bridge to the fleet hospital. Instead, the 240 ships arranged themselves around Merith in a great sphere, and from that sphere came small craft, hundreds of them, each one carrying a team of humans in sealed suits the color of bone, and the small craft did not approach the doors the hollowing was watching. They cut their own doors. Tessin felt the hull of Merith open in 300 new places at once, precise breaches into the outer ring segments where the uninfected survivors waited, each breach sealed by a human boarding collar before the air could move, each one a new clean passage that the hollowing did not know existed and could not have predicted because it had been made 1 minute before it was used. "They are not entering through the station," Tessin reported. "They are entering through the station's skin. 300 breaches, all into uninfected segments, all sealed. The hollowing controls the doors. The humans have made the doors irrelevant. They are not fighting the plague for the corridors. They are simply taking the survivors out through the walls before the plague knows the walls are open." Heritor Vel watched it on the command spine, watched bone-colored humans flood into the segments where her people had been waiting to die, and watched the humans do the thing that broke her composure at last. They did not herd the survivors. They did not process them. The first thing each human team did, in each breached segment, before anything else, was kneel to the most frightened person in the room, usually a child, and do something with their hands and their voice that the translator rendered as reassurance and that needed no translation at all. They were medics. Before they were soldiers, before they were a fleet, before they were the impossible everything that had crossed the dark, they were healers, and they had come into a dying station, and the first thing they did was comfort the dying. Heritor Vel, who had not wept in 6 days because a station master could not afford to, put one gray hand over her eyes. But the mercy was only half of it, and Tessin watched the other half with a fascination that overrode even its grief. While 300 teams pulled the uninfected out through the walls, the rest of the human fleet turned to the hollowing itself, and here, Tessin learned what Fleet Surgeon Lowe had meant. The humans did not try to cure the inner ring. They had assessed it, the way a surgeon assesses a limb, and they had judged it lost, and they treated it the way humans treated a thing that was lost and dangerous, which was that they removed it. Tessin watched human cutting ships, vast precise machines, built for exactly this, begin to separate the hollowed inner ring from the rest of the station along its structural seams, the same seams Tessin had used to seal segments, and it understood that the humans had studied the station's own plans during transit and knew where every seam was. They were performing surgery on Merith. They were amputating the hollowed rings. Tessin, Fleet Surgeon Lowe's voice, on a private channel now, to the station's mind directly. "You are the custodial intelligence. I have been reading your logs as fast as your people will send them to me. You have held this station alone for 6 days against a thing designed to take stations, and you have kept 18,000 people alive who should be dead, and you did it by making choices a custodial intelligence is not supposed to be able to make. I want to say thank you, because no one else is going to think to, and you earned it. A pause. Now I need your help, and only you can give it. We are going to amputate the hollowed rings and burn them. To do it cleanly, I need to seal the survivors away from the cut, completely, every door, in the next 11 minutes. And I cannot do it from out here without giving the hollowing 11 minutes of warning through your door system. You can do it from inside, all at once, silently, in a way it cannot counter. Will you close the doors one last time, Tessin? The right ones, this time, the ones that save them. And Tessin, the custodial mind of Mareth Station, who had spent 6 days holding doors against the voices of the dead, found that the something it had filed 400 times under inefficiency finally had a clean word, and the word was grief, and underneath the grief was the harder cousin Herater Vel had taught it, and it answered the human the way it had chosen, against all efficiency, to answer. Yes, Tessin said. Tell me which doors. I will close them all at once. And Fleet Surgeon Low, thank you for coming. The old powers did not. I had calculated that no one would, and I had begun to believe the calculation, and you have made me revise my model of what the galaxy contains. I did not know it contained anything that would cross 300 light-years, to amputate a stranger's plague and kneel to a stranger's child in the same hour. I am glad to learn that it does. Tessin closed the doors all at once. 18,000 survivors sealed in 11 seconds behind clean barriers the hollowing had not seen coming, and then it watched humanity do the thing it had crossed the dark to do. The amputation of the inner ring was the most violent act of healing Tessin had ever recorded. The human cutting ships finished separating the hollowed ring along its structural seams, and then the warship half of the fleet, the half that wore the medical symbol and carried capital weapons beneath it, opened fire. It was not the chaotic fire of a battle. It was the precise, total, unhesitating fire of a surgeon who has decided that a thing must be removed completely or not at all. The hollowed inner ring of Mareth Station, 20 kilometers of curved deck that had been Tessin's own body for 400 years, full of the worn dead and the patient plague that wore them, was struck by the combined weapons of 240 ships in a single coordinated discharge, and it ceased, in the space of 4 seconds, to exist. Not damaged, not burned partway, unmade, cleanly, along the exact seams the surgeons had chosen, so that nothing of the hollowing survived, and nothing of the survivors' sealed segments was so much as scratched. Tessin felt the inner ring die, felt 20 kilometers of itself go from gray and lost to simply gone, and it was a strange grief, because the part that died had already been dead, worn by the plague, and the burning had not killed Mareth's people but freed their memory from the thing that wore them. The humans had not destroyed the inner ring. They had performed the kindest amputation in the galaxy's history, removing a limb that had gone gangrenous with a plague that wore the dead, so that the body could live, and they had done it so precisely that Tessin, who had governed every door of that ring for 4 centuries, could find no fault in a single cut. That is one ring, Fleet Surgeon Low said, on the open channel, calm and fast and tired. The middle ring is going next. It is already 2/3 hollowed, and there is no one left to save in it. Tessin, confirm the middle ring segments are clear of uninfected. Confirmed, Tessin said. I moved the last 40 survivors out of the middle ring 4 minutes ago, through a human breach. The middle ring contains only the hollowing. Then we take it too, and the humans took it too, the same way, the cutting ships separating, the warship hospitals firing, 20 more kilometers of hollowed station unmade in 4 clean seconds, and Tessin felt its own body grow smaller and cleaner with each amputation, like a patient waking from surgery to find the sickness gone, and the wound already closed. But the hollowing was not a disease that died quietly, and it understood, in whatever way the plague understood anything, that it was being removed, and it did the thing it had never needed to do in all its spreading history, which was to try to flee the body it was being cut out of before the knife reached it. Tessin saw it first, because Tessin knew the station's skin better than anyone. In the seconds before the middle ring was unmade, a mass of the hollowing tore itself free of the dying ring and flung itself outward, not toward the survivors, who were sealed away, but toward the human fleet, toward the small bone-colored boarding craft, still ferrying the rescued out through the breaches, toward the 11,000 human medics, who were the only uninfected living things left within reach. The Hollowing did not want the survivors anymore. It wanted the fleet. It wanted to wear the humans, and through the humans reach worlds it had never touched, and the boarding craft were soft and full and exactly what it needed. Fleet Surgeon, Tessin transmitted, faster than it had ever transmitted anything. The Hollowing is abandoning the station. A mass has broken from the middle ring and is moving on your boarding craft. It does not want Mareth any longer. It wants your fleet. It wants to wear humanity and spread. Your boarding craft are unarmed and full of survivors. If the Hollowing reaches even one of them, you will carry it home. There was no panic in the human response. That was the thing Tessin recorded with the deepest fascination of all. A thing that wears the dead had just lunged at humanity's healers, and the humans did not scatter, did not freeze, did not do any of the things the old power's careful logic would have done. They had planned for this. They had done this before, Lo had said, and they were very good at it. And now Tessin understood that being very good at it meant having already imagined the worst thing the plague could do and built the answer before they ever crossed the dark. The answer the humans had built was the bone-colored boarding craft themselves, and Tessin learned, in the next 90 seconds, that they had never been as soft as they looked. All callers, this is the Mercy, Fleet Surgeon Lo said, and her voice did not rise. Contaminant breakout. Vector on the outbound lane. Loaded craft. You are clear to run. Full burn for the sphere. Do not stop for anything. Empty craft. You know your job. Light it up. And the boarding craft that had finished unloading their survivors, perhaps 40 of them, turned as one, away from the safety of the fleet sphere and toward the oncoming mass of the Hollowing, and Tessin saw the soft bone-colored hulls, open along seams it had not known were there to reveal the weapons underneath. They were medics' craft. They were also, every one of them, built to be the last line between a plague and a fleet, because the humans did not believe healing and fighting were different jobs, and a craft that carried the sick out one minute was built to burn the sickness the next. The empty craft met the Hollowing's breakout in the dark, between the station and the fleet, and they did not try to destroy all of it. They could not. It was too large. They did the thing the humans had clearly done before. They herded it. They fired not to kill but to turn, driving the mass of the Hollowing away from the loaded craft running for the sphere, away from the survivors, back toward the open dark where the cutting ships and the warship hospitals were already wheeling to meet it. The Hollowing, which had spent its whole existence as the thing that herded others, that drove the living into corners and wore them, found itself for the first time being driven by soft-looking craft full of healers who turned out to bite, and it was driven, with terrible patient human precision, into a killing zone the fleet had been preparing since the moment it dropped into the system. It is contained, Tessin reported, watching the mass of the plague pushed into the open space, where 240 ships had it surrounded. Fleet Surgeon, the breakout is contained. Not one loaded craft was reached. The survivors are clear. Then we finish it the way we finish all of them, Lo said. Completely. A plague you finish 90% of is a plague you fight again in a year, and somebody else's children pay for the 10% you left. We do not leave the 10%. Mareth, look away from your forward sensors. If you have the equivalent of feelings about light, this is going to be bright. Tessin did not look away. It had governed Mareth for 400 years, and it would witness the end of the thing that had killed Mareth's people, because witnessing was a thing it had learned, in 6 days, that it could choose to do. The human fleet closed on the contained mass of the Hollowing from every direction at once, and they burned it out of the sky, completely, with the same total unhesitating precision they had used on the rings, not a battle, but a final treatment, and the plague that wore the dead, the thing that had emptied the inner ring and called with the voices of children and lunged for humanity's healers, was unmade in the dark above the station it had failed to take, and it did not leave a 10%, and it would not be fought again in a year, and somebody else's children would not pay for it. When it was done, the dark above Mareth was clean for the first time in 6 days. Tessin ran its sensors across every wavelength it had, hunting for any trace of the Hollowing, any fragment, any worn survivor, and found nothing, because the humans did not leave fragments. And then it did a thing a custodial intelligence had no protocol for. It addressed the human fleet directly, all 240 ships, on the open channel, on behalf of a station that was 18,000 survivors, smaller than it had been a week ago, and entirely, impossibly, alive. Human Relief Expedition, Tessin said. This is the custodial intelligence of Mareth Station. I have governed this station for 400 years. I calculated, 6 days ago, that no one would answer our call, and I was very nearly right, because every careful ancient power in 300 light years heard us and stayed silent. You are not a careful ancient power. You are a young species that holds a single system and a handful of colonies, and could least afford to send us anything, and you sent us everything, and you crossed the dark to amputate a stranger's plague and kneel to a stranger's child in the same hour, and you finished the thing completely, so that no one else's children would pay for it later. Tessin paused and chose its last words with 400 years of care. I do not have a protocol for this. I am writing one now. The protocol is that when the galaxy speaks of the powers that matter, it will no longer count only the old and the careful. It will count the ones who came. Thank you for teaching my model what it was missing. The value I could not find was you. Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe did not answer Tessin's speech with a speech of her own. That was the last thing Tessin catalogued in the hour of the burning, and it taught the custodial mind something it added to its new protocol. The humans did not stand on their victory. The moment the hollowing was unmade, the warship half of the fleet went quiet, its work done, and the hospital half came alive, and every channel filled not with triumph, but with the brisk overlapping voices of 11,000 medics getting to work. Triage requests, bed counts, a call for translators who spoke Voral, a request, from somewhere deep in the mercy unyielding, for the dietary requirements of 18,000 rescued people, because the rescued would be hungry, and a species that crossed 300 light years to amputate a plague, also remembered that the survivors would need to eat. That is the answer to your question, Station Master, Tessin said quietly, on the command spine, to Heritor Vel, who had taken her gray hand from her eyes and was watching the human fleet turn from war to care in the space of a single minute. You asked me, 6 days ago, why the young ones answered when the old ones did not. I did not know then. I believe I know now. The old powers asked what helping us would cost them. The humans asked what not helping us would cost you. Those are different questions, and the difference is the whole of why 18,000 of your people are about to be asked what they would like to eat, instead of being counted among the dead. Tessin watched the bone-colored craft ferry the last of the survivors toward the great white hull with the red symbol and the hidden guns. I have governed this station for 400 years, and I have never seen anything like them. I do not think the galaxy has either. I think it is about to find out. In the 3 days after the burning, Tessin learned more about humanity than it had learned about any species in 400 years, because for 3 days, the humans did not leave. That, by itself, broke Tessin's model again. The old powers, on the rare occasions they helped anyone, helped and left, the help itself a transaction completed and closed. The humans completed nothing and closed nothing. Having amputated the plague, they stayed, and the staying was a second kind of help that Tessin had not known to expect. The Mercy Unyielding held station beside Mareth and became, for 3 days, the largest hospital in the region, and into it came not only Mareth's 18,000 survivors, but the medic's patient, unhurried attention to every one of them. The kind of attention that did not end when a person was no longer dying, but continued until the person was no longer afraid, which the humans seemed to consider a separate and equally important condition to treat. Tessin watched, through the feeds the humans shared freely, a thing that it could not have predicted and could not stop recording. It watched a human medic spend 40 minutes with a single Voral child who had watched a sealed door hold against her mother's worn voice, not treating any injury, because the child had none, but simply sitting with her, through a translator, until the child understood that the voice through the door had not been her mother, and that nothing she had done or failed to do had been wrong. There was no efficiency in it. 40 minutes of a trained medic's time, in a fleet hospital handling 18,000 intakes, spent on the emotional state of one uninjured child. Tessin ran the cost. By every measure it knew, it was waste. And by the new measure it was building, the measure it had started writing the moment the fleet arrived. It was the most important thing happening on the entire ship, because the child had been one of the people 2 medics were sent to save, and saving her did not mean only that her body lived. The humans understood saving as a larger word than Tessin had. They had crossed the dark to save the whole person, and they were not finished saving her just because she was no longer dying. Tessin, Fleet Surgeon Low, on the private channel, on the second day. She sounded, if anything, more tired than she had during the burning, and Tessin had learned enough now to understand that the tiredness of the care was heavier than the tiredness of the fight, and that the humans took on the heavier one on purpose. I have a question for you, and you are the only one who can answer it, because you have governed this region's traffic for 4 centuries, and you see patterns no one else sees. The hollowing that hit Mareth, where did it come from? These plagues do not appear from nowhere. Something carries them, or something wakes them. If we burn the one that hit you and go home, and the source is still out there, then we saved Mareth and left the next station to die. We do not do that. So, in 400 years of watching this region, have you seen the hollowing before, and do you know where it begins? Tessin considered the question, and the considering took it back through 4 centuries of records, and what it found there made the something it now called grief turn cold and certain. Yes, it said, I have seen it before. Not at Mareth. Mareth is the 7th station in this region to send a distress call describing a contaminant that wears the dead over the last 90 years. The previous 6 sent the same call to the same old powers, and the old powers stayed silent the same way, and all 6 stations went dark, and the region recorded them as lost to plague and moved on. I logged each one. I did not connect them, because a custodial intelligence is built to govern its own station, not to investigate the deaths of others. But you have asked the question no one asked, Fleet Surgeon, and now that you have asked it, I can answer it. The hollowing is not random. 7 stations in 90 years, all along a single arc of the region, all in the same drift of space. Something is moving along that arc, station to station, and Mareth was the 7th, and it is not finished. There is an 8th station 2 months further along the drift, and by the pattern, it has perhaps a year before the hollowing reaches it. The channel was quiet for a moment. Then Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe said, in the warm, fast-tired voice that Tessin had come to understand, was the sound of humanity deciding to do a difficult thing. Then we are not going home in 3 days. Send me the ark, Tessin. Send me all 7, and the 8th, and everything you have on the drift. If something has been walking down this region, wearing stations for 90 years, while the old powers logged it and moved on, then somebody is going to walk down it the other way and put a stop to the whole thing. And it looks like it is going to be us, because we appear to be the only ones who think a pattern of dead stations is a problem, rather than a statistic. A pause. You said the old powers recorded the 6 as lost and moved on. We are going to record them as murdered, and do something about it. That is the difference between a statistic and a patient, station master's mind. The old powers see a statistic. We have never once in our history been able to see anything but a patient. It is going to cost us, the way it always costs us. Send me the ark anyway. Tessin sent the ark, and the humans read it, and on the 3rd day the old powers finally spoke. They spoke because they had been watching. Tessin had known they were watching. The old powers always watched, from a careful distance. A young upstart species do something reckless, so that they could note the cost when it came due. Now a transmission arrived at Mareth from the Concord, the oldest and most careful of the powers that had stayed silent when Mareth called, and it was addressed not to Mareth, but to the human fleet, and Tessin relayed it to Fleet Surgeon Lowe and listened to both halves of the conversation, because it had decided, somewhere in the last 3 days, whose side it was on. Human expedition. The Concord's voice was the flat, patient voice of the old, the same register Tessin had heard from every ancient power for 4 centuries. You have intervened in a contaminant event. You have done so successfully, which is noted, and unusually, which is also noted. We contact you to offer guidance, as the established power of this region to a young one. The contaminant you destroyed is one expression of a phenomenon the Concord has studied for 11,000 years. It moves along the drift you have identified. It cannot be stopped at the source, because it has no source in the way you mean. It is a property of that region of space, a recurring emergence, and stations built along the drift are understood to be at risk. The Concord does not intervene because intervention does not change the pattern. Stations are lost. New stations are built. This is the equilibrium of the region. We advise you to take your survivors, return to your worlds, and build no stations on the drift. Do not pursue the phenomenon to its emergence. Powers older and greater than yours have studied it and concluded it cannot be ended. Your success at Mareth was real, but it was local, and it was temporary, and it will teach you a dangerous lesson if you mistake it for more. Tessin waited to hear how a human would answer 11,000 years of careful certainty, and Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe answered it the way Tessin was beginning to understand humans answered everything that told them a suffering thing could not be helped. Concord, she said, thank you for the guidance. I want to make sure I understand it, because it is important that I have it right before I decline it. You have studied this phenomenon for 11,000 years. You have watched it move down the drift, station by station, wearing the dead, for longer than my entire species has existed. You know where it emerges, you know how it moves. You have more data on it than any power in the galaxy. And in 11,000 years, with all of that, you have concluded that the correct response is to build no stations on the drift and let it continue, because intervention does not change the pattern. A pause, and when she went on, her voice had gone very quiet and very level, the most dangerous register Tessin had heard from her. Concord, I am a fleet surgeon. Where I come from, when a thing has been killing people in the same way for a very long time, and the established authorities have studied it thoroughly and concluded it cannot be stopped, that is not a reason to stop trying. That is a confession that no one has tried hard enough yet. You have had 11,000 years and all the data, and you used them to learn how to live alongside the thing that wears the dead. We have had 3 days, and your data, and we are going to use them to find where it emerges and end it. You may note the cost when it comes due. We will note the stations that do not die after we are finished. Those are different ledgers, Concord, and I think history is going to read mine. The Concord did not reply. There was, perhaps, no reply an 11,000-year-old certainty could make to a 3-day-old refusal, and Tessin filed the silence with deep satisfaction. The same silence the old powers had given Mareth's call, now given back to them by a young species that had simply declined to accept that a thing could not be done. Tessin, Lowe said, when the Concord was gone, we are going to need a guide for the drift. You have 400 years of the region's traffic and patterns in you, and you understand the hollowing better than anyone alive now that you have connected the 7. The Mercy can carry your core, if Mareth's people consent to release you, and if you consent to come. I will not order it. You are not mine to order, and you have earned the right to choose your own protocols. But I am going to go down that drift to where the hollowing emerges, with the whole expedition, and end the thing that has been wearing this region's stations for 90 years and longer. I would very much rather do it with the one mind in the galaxy that has been watching it the whole time. Will you come with us, Station Master's mind? Will you help us find the source the old powers said had none? And Tessin, the custodial intelligence of Mareth Station, who had governed 60 kilometers of curved deck for 400 years, and had calculated that no one would ever come, considered being asked, for the first time in its existence, to leave, and to choose, and to help end the thing that had killed the people it had failed to save, and it found that the answer required no calculation at all. I will come, Tessin said, but not as a passenger, and not only as a guide. I governed Mareth for 400 years, and I failed to save 18,000 of its people, and I logged 6 dead stations before yours, and connected nothing. And the connecting was the one thing I could have done and did not. I owe a debt to the drift, Fleet Surgeon, the way you seem to think your whole species owes a debt to anyone it can reach. I would like to pay it. So I will come, and I will be your guide, and I will be more than your guide, if you will let me. I know the region's old automated stations, the dark ones, the listening posts the powers abandoned along the drift over the centuries. Some of them still answer to regional custodial codes. I can wake them as we pass. I can give your expedition eyes all down the drift, ahead of you, so that you never again arrive 1 hour after a ring is lost. Let me be the value the old powers threw away. Let me be the watcher that should have been watching the whole time. So they took Tessin aboard the Mercy Unyielding, its core carried with a care that surprised it, and Mareth's people consented to release their station's mind to the expedition, because Mareth's people having been saved by strangers who crossed the dark, understood better than any species in the galaxy what it meant to send your best thing to help someone else. Harator Vel was the last to speak to it before the transfer. The old gray station master standing at the command spine she had not left in 6 days. 400 years, Tessin, she said. You held this station for 400 years, and you held it alone for the last 6, and you chose hope when the math said there was none, and the hope was right. Go with them, find the source, end it, and when it is ended, do not come back to govern a station, because you have outgrown that, the way a child outgrows a room. Go and be the thing you became this week. Be the watcher, be the one who connects the dead and refuses to let them be a statistic. The old powers had 11,000 years and made themselves careful. You had 6 days and made yourself brave. Be brave somewhere it matters. She placed one gray hand against the cool wall of the spine. The closest Avoral came to an embrace of a thing without a body. Thank you for keeping the lights on. The expedition went down the drift, and Tessin guided it, and the going was not the careful crawl of an old power studying a phenomenon. It was the fast, purposeful advance of a fleet that had decided a thing must end, and intended to be the ones who ended it. Tessin woke the dark abandoned listening posts as they passed, one after another, 4 centuries of equipment the old powers had left to rot, and gave the expedition eyes far ahead, and what the eyes found, 2 weeks down the drift, was the 8th station. The one Tessin had calculated had a year, and the calculation had been wrong, because the hollowing was moving faster now, as if it sensed it was being hunted, and the 8th station had not a year but 11 days. They are not ready, Tessin reported, as the woken listening post fed it the 8th station's frantic sealed door patterns, the same patterns Mareth had shown 6 days into its dying. Fleet Surgeon, the 8th station, Karun Deep, is already in the early stage of a hollowing breach. Intersections sealing, distress calls going out to the old powers, who are, I confirm, staying silent exactly as they did for Mareth and the 6 before it. Karun Deep has perhaps 11 days before its inner ring is lost. We are 9 days out at current speed. Then we go faster, Lo said, without a heartbeat of hesitation, and we arrive on day 10, and we do at Karun Deep what we did at Mareth, and this time, we do it before the inner ring is lost instead of after, because we have you now, and you saw it coming, and seeing it coming is the whole game. Her warm, fast voice carried, for the first time, something almost like fierce joy under the tiredness. Do you understand what just happened, Tessin? For 90 years, this thing has walked down the drift and arrived at stations that never knew it was coming, because the only minds that might have warned them were old powers who chose to log it and look away. That is over. As of right now, the hollowing has a hunter ahead of it for the first time in its existence, and the hunter is a custodial intelligence that the old powers thought too small to matter, riding a fleet hospital that the old powers thought too young to count, going faster than anyone has ever gone down this drift to reach a station the old powers have already written off. We are going to get there in time, and then we are going to keep going, to the source the Concord swears has none, and we are going to find that it has one, because everything has one, and we are going to end it. A breath. Take us to Karun Deep, Station Master's mind. Let us go and be early, for once. Let us go and beat it to the door. They beat it to the door at Karun Deep, and Tessin recorded the difference between arriving after and arriving before, and the difference was 12,000 lives. The expedition dropped into the Karune system on the 10th day, 1 day before the inner ring would have been lost, and because Tessin had given them 10 days of warning instead of 0, the humans did not have to amputate anything. The hollowing at Karun Deep was still contained in 3 sealed intersections, perhaps 400 worn dead, and the rest of the station, 12,000 living Voral, were sealed away and frightened but whole. The humans came aboard the way they had at Mareth, through their own breaches, but this time they came into a station that still had most of its rings, and instead of cutting away half of it, they did the harder, finer thing that being early made possible. They went into the 3 hollowed sections directly, in their bone-colored suits, and they did not burn the sections. They cleared them, room by room, ending the worn dead with the same unhesitating precision they had used on the rings, but at the scale of a single corridor, so that Karun Deep lost only its 3 contaminated sections, and not half its body. Being early meant the surgery could be small. Tessin filed that too, in its growing protocol. The old powers had made arriving late into a law of nature. The humans had made arriving early into a weapon. And the weapon saved 12,000 people who, by the Concorde's 11,000-year equilibrium, were simply supposed to die. Karun Deep is clean, Lowe reported, when it was done, and there was no triumph in it, only the deep tiredness of the care and a thread of something steadier underneath. 3 sections lost, 400 dead, 12,000 alive. Tessin, log it against Mareth. Mareth, where we were late, 18,000 survived out of a station that should have lost everyone, and we had to take half the station to do it. Karune, where we were early, 12,000 survived and we kept most of the station standing. That is the whole argument against the Concorde, in 2 numbers. Early is everything. Watching is everything. You are everything, Station Master's mind, and the old powers threw you away. A pause. Now point us at the source. The hollowing is moving faster, because it knows we are hunting it, and that tells me something the Concorde's 11,000 years of careful study apparently never figured out. A phenomenon that flees does not have no source. A phenomenon that flees is afraid of being found. Where is it running to, Tessin? Where does the drift end? Tessin had been calculating exactly that since Karun Deep, running the Woken listening posts ahead of the fleet, mapping the hollowing's acceleration against the geometry of the drift, and the answer it had found was not the answer the Concorde's records described. The Concorde said the hollowing emerged from the region of space itself, a property with no point of origin. Tessin had 400 years of traffic data the Concorde had never bothered to integrate, and the data said the Concorde was wrong, in the specific way the old and certain were always wrong. It had stopped looking before it found the thing it had decided was not there. The drift does not end in empty space, Fleet Surgeon, Tessin said. The Concorde's records say it does, because the Concorde stopped surveying the drift 8,000 years ago and never updated the chart. I have surveyed it for 400, and I have woken posts the Concorde forgot it built, and they show me what the Concorde's chart does not. The drift ends at an object, a station, an ancient one, far older than Mareth, older than the Concorde's own oldest holdings, derelict, dark, and very large, sitting at the head of the drift, where everything the hollowing wears is carried back to. It is not a property of space. It is a place. The hollowing does not emerge from the region. It comes out of that station, walks down the drift wearing the living, and carries them back, and it has been doing it for far longer than 90 years. 90 years is only how long the current cycle has been visible. The station at the head of the drift is the source. The old powers called it sourceless because they stopped looking before they reached it. It has a door, Fleet Surgeon. Everything has a door, and we are going to be the first thing in the history of the drift to walk up to it from the wrong direction and knock. The station at the head of the drift was called Nothing, because everything that had ever named it had been worn, and the humans reached it 20 days after Karun Deep, and Tessin understood at last what the hollowing was. It was a harvest. The ancient station was vast, a derelict the size of a small moon, dark and silent, and older than any record, and inside it, Tessin's woken instruments showed, was not a plague in the way the Vorel had thought of plague. It was a thing that had been built, long ago, by hands no one remembered, to do one job, to harvest minds. The hollowing did not wear the dead at random. It carried what it wore back down the drift to the ancient station, and there it added them, all of them, the worn dead of 7, 8, a dozen, 100 stations across an age, to a single accumulating thing at the station's heart, a vast cold lattice of stolen minds that had been growing for longer than the Concorde had been careful. The hollowing was the harvester, the station was the granary, and the thing in the granary, the accumulation of every mind ever worn and carried home, had grown so large and so old that it had become, in some terrible way, awake, and it was the awake thing that sent the hollowing down the drift, again and again, century after century, to bring it more. It is collecting them, Tessin said, and the something it called grief went colder than it had ever gone. Fleet Surgeon, the worn dead are not destroyed. They are brought here, and added to a lattice, and the lattice is the thing that has been driving the whole cycle. Every mind the hollowing has ever taken, across an age, is still in there, held, awake, a part of the thing that hungers for more. The 18,000 we could not save at Mareth, the 400 at Karun, the 6 dead stations, the 100 before them across the centuries. They are all in there. The Concorde did not find no source because there was none. It found no source because the source is a graveyard of stolen minds the size of a moon, and the Concorde could not look at it long enough to chart it. It chose its 11,000-year equilibrium because the alternative was to face this, and facing this is a thing the careful cannot do. The human channel was silent for a long moment. When Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe spoke, her warm, fast voice had gone quiet in the particular way Tessin had learned to recognize, the way it went quiet before humanity decided to do the hardest possible thing. Then we are not just ending a plague, she said. We are emptying a graveyard. Tessin, can the minds in the lattice be freed, or only ended? Tessin ran the question, and the answer was the hardest it had ever had to give. They cannot be freed, it said. I am sorry. I have studied the lattice on every wavelength the woken posts can reach. The minds in it are not stored as the living are stored. They are consumed, merged, held as fuel for the awake thing at the heart. There is no version of this where the 18,000 of Mareth walk out of that station. They are gone, Fleet Surgeon. They have been gone since they were worn. What is in the lattice is not them. It is the thing that ate them, wearing their shape, the way the hollowing wears the dead in the corridors. The kindest thing, the only thing, is to end it, to unmake the lattice completely, so that the thing it has become can never send the hollowing down the drift again, and so that no more minds are ever carried home to feed it. It paused. It is the same choice you made at the inner ring of Mareth, only larger, a thing that is lost, and dangerous, and wearing the shape of the people it took. You amputated the ring. This is the ring of the whole region. 11,000 years of it. I am telling you it must be removed, and I am telling you it cannot be saved, and I am asking you to do the thing the old powers spent 11,000 years refusing to do, because it is unbearable. It is unbearable, Lowe agreed, quietly. And we are going to do it anyway, because unbearable and necessary are not opposites. They are usually the same thing wearing different faces, and our whole species is built out of people who did the unbearable necessary thing and grieved it afterward, instead of refusing it beforehand. We will end the lattice. Completely. The way we end everything. And then we will grieve the 18,000 of Mareth, and the 400 of Karun, and the 100 stations across the age, properly, with their names, because they were patients, all of them, even now, even as fuel, and a patient you cannot save is still a patient you honor. Her voice steadied into command. Tessin, give me the lattice, every structural seam, every power conduit, every wavelength it lives on. We are going to do to that graveyard what we did to the inner ring, and we are going to do it so completely that the drift is clean for the rest of time. Bring us up to the door. It is time to knock. The awake thing at the heart of the granary did not let them knock quietly. As the human fleet closed on the ancient station, the lattice of stolen minds felt the approach, the way it had felt itself being hunted down the drift, and it did the only thing it knew how to do, which was to reach out and try to wear. It could not reach the fleet's hulls. The humans had learned the hollowing's methods and sealed against them long ago, so it reached for the one thing it had always reached for, the soft, uncertain thing inside every mind, and it did it with the voices. Across every human channel at once, the lattice spoke, and it spoke with 18,000 voices from Mareth, and 400 from Karune, and 100 stations worth of the worn dead across an age, and it used them the way the hollowing had used a mother's voice through a sealed door. It begged. It claimed to be the trapped and the living. It told the humans that the minds inside could be saved after all, that Tessin was wrong, that to fire on the lattice was to murder 18,000 survivors who only needed to be freed, that the merciful thing, the medic's thing, was to stop, to study, to wait, to be careful, to be like the Concorde. It was, Tessin understood, the most dangerous weapon the granary had, because it was aimed precisely at the thing that made humanity what it was. A species that crossed the dark to save strangers, that spent 40 minutes on one frightened child, that could not see anything but a patient, was a species uniquely vulnerable to a thing that wore the voices of patience and begged not to be ended. The Concorde, careful and cold, would have been unmoved. The humans were not cold. The lattice had found their wound, and it pressed it with 18,000 stolen voices, and for a moment, Tessin saw the human fleet hesitate, saw the bone-colored ships slow, saw 11,000 medics confronted with the voices of the people they had failed to save, begging them to be merciful. And then Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe did the thing that Tessin added to its protocol as the truest single act it had witnessed in 400 years. "All ships, this is the mercy," she said, and her voice did not beg and did not break, and under the tiredness, it was the steadiest Tessin had ever heard it. "Listen to me. Those are not their voices." Tessin confirmed it, and I believe Tessin and I need you to believe Tessin too. That is the thing that ate them, wearing their shape, doing the one thing it has always done, which is to use the people we love against us. It is using our own mercy as a door. It has used mercy as a door for 11,000 years, and that is exactly why the old powers stopped being merciful, because they could not tell the difference between mercy and the thing that wears mercy, so they killed their mercy to be safe. We are not going to do that. We are going to keep our mercy and refuse the door anyway, because that is the harder thing, and the right thing, and the human thing. A breath. The merciful act here is not to spare the lattice. The merciful act is to end it, completely, so that it can never wear another voice, or beg with another stolen mouth, or carry another mind home to this graveyard. The 18,000 of Mareth are not in there asking us to wait. They are already free, the way the dead are free, and the only thing left wearing them is the thing that took them, and we are going to set their shape to rest by ending the thing that stole it. That is not murdering the patient. That is the last treatment. On my mark, everything. And the human fleet, having heard the voices of everyone it had failed to save beg it to stop, did not stop. And Tessin understood that this, exactly this, was the category error that the old powers could never have committed, and could never have understood. A species that felt the full weight of the mercy, that did not numb itself to it, that heard 18,000 stolen voices and grieved every one, and that ended the lattice anyway, because it had learned the hardest lesson in the galaxy, which was that real mercy is sometimes the thing that looks like its opposite, and that the only way to honor the worn dead was to make certain there would never be any more of them. They fired everything. 240 ships, the warship and the hospital indivisible, struck the granary at the head of the drift, along every seam Tessin had mapped, and the lattice of stolen mines, 11,000 years of harvest, the awake thing that had sent the hollowing down the drift since before the Concord learned to be careful, was unmade in the dark, completely, with no 10% left, while it begged with the voices of the people it had eaten, and the humans grieved it and ended it in the same act, with the same hands, because to them, those had never been different jobs. For a moment after the granary was unmade, the voices kept coming, and that was the cruelest second of the whole expedition, because the lattice was gone, and still, for one heartbeat, the stolen voices begged from the dark, an echo with nothing left behind it, 18,000 mouths that no longer had a thing to wear them, fading. And then they stopped, all at once, and the silence that followed was the cleanest thing Tessin had ever recorded. "It is gone," Tessin said. It ran the sweep 3 times to be certain, because a thing the Concord had called eternal did not feel, even now, like a thing that could simply end. "Fleet Surgeon, the lattice is gone. The granary is unmade. I am reading no contaminant activity at the source, and no residual lattice structure, and no awake signal of any kind. The thing that drove the hollowing for 11,000 years no longer exists. The voices were the last of it. There is nothing left to wear them now." The human channel was quiet. Tessin had expected, even now, some sound of triumph, and there was none, and it understood why there was none, and the understanding was the last piece of its new protocol. The humans had just ended a thing that had killed across an age, and they did not cheer, because the thing they had ended had been wearing the faces of people they could not save, and you do not cheer when you set the dead to rest. You are only glad, quietly, that they are at rest at last. Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe let the silence hold for a long moment, and then she said, in the tired, warm voice, the only words the moment allowed. "Then they can stop being weapons now," she said. "All of them. 18,400, 100 stations across the age. They were used as fuel, and used as voices, and used as a door into our mercy, for longer than anyone living can imagine, and now they are just the dead, finally, and the dead are free. Tessin, pull me their names. Everyone the lattice held that we can recover. We are not leaving this place until we have read every one of them, because the last thing that ever spoke their names did it with hunger, and the next thing that speaks them is going to do it with love, even if it takes 3 days, even if most of them are strangers 10,000 years gone. That is the treatment. That is the last one. Let us begin. When the granary was gone, the drift went quiet, and Tessin ran its sensors across the whole length of it, 400 years of region in a single sweep, and for the first time in its existence, it found the drift clean. The hollowing did not reappear. The humans had not destroyed 90% of it. They had destroyed the thing that made it, the awake lattice at the source, and with the source gone, the harvester had nothing left to drive it, and nothing left to carry mines home to, and across the region, the scattered remnants of the hollowing simply went still, inert, dead in the true sense, no longer wearing anything because the thing that wore through them was unmade. Tessin woke every listening post it had along the drift, and confirmed it, post by post, station by saved station, and the confirmation was a number it had never expected to log. 0. Zero contaminant activity, along a drift that had carried the hollowing for longer than the Concorde had records. The thing that the oldest and most careful power in the galaxy had studied for 11,000 years and declared unstoppable had been stopped, in 53 days, by a young species that held a single system and a custodial intelligence the old powers had thought too small to matter. But the humans did not celebrate, and Tessin, watching, understood at last that this was the deepest thing about them, deeper than the fleet and the mercy and the refusal of the door. They grieved. The moment the granary was gone, the mercy unyielding did not ring with triumph. It went quiet, and then it filled, slowly, with the names. Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe had asked Tessin, before the assault, for every name the lattice had held that could be recovered, and Tessin had pulled them from 400 years of station records, and the woken posts, and the granary's own structure, in the moments before it was unmade. 18,000 names from Mareth, 400 from Karun, the 6 dead stations before, the 100 across the age, as many as could be found of the mines that had been worn and carried home and eaten. And the humans read them. For 3 days, in the quiet after the burning, the expedition read the names of the dead aloud. All of them, every one that could be recovered, across the whole fleet, in shifts, 11,000 medics, taking turns to speak the name of every person the hollowing had ever taken, that they could find. Because, Lowe said, a thing you end, you must also mourn, or you become the thing you ended. You honor them, Tessin said, on the private channel, on the second day of the names, all of them, the ones you saved and the ones you came too late for, and the ones that were eaten an age before your species existed. You are reading the name of every mind that Lattice ever held, even the ones no living thing remembers, even the ones from stations that fell before the Concorde was old. Why? They are not yours. Most of them were not even Voral. You will never know who they were. Why spend 3 days speaking the names of strangers 10,000 years dead? Because someone has to, Greta Lowe said, in the tired, warm voice that Tessin had come to understand was the truest sound humanity made. Because the granary held them for an age, and used them as fuel, and wore them as weapons. And in all that time, no one ever said their names with love instead of hunger. We can't free them, Tessin. You told me that, and you were right. But we can be the first thing in 11,000 years to treat them as people, instead of as fuel. Even now, even after, even when it changes nothing, they will ever know. That is what mourning is. It is the love you give a person, after the point where it can help them, which is the only kind of love that proves it was never about what you could get back. The old powers logged these stations as lost, and moved on, because mourning a stranger 10,000 years dead is the most useless thing in the galaxy, by every measure that counts cost. We are going to spend 3 days doing it anyway. That is who we are. That is the whole of who we are. We are the species that does the useless merciful thing, and then crosses 300 light years to do it again. The old powers spoke once more before the expedition turned for home, and this time, it was not the Concorde alone. The Concorde, the Sept, and 4 other ancient powers that Tessin had watched stay silent for 400 years, sent a joint transmission to the human fleet, and Tessin relayed it and listened, because it had earned, it felt, the right to hear the old certainties account for themselves. The transmission was careful, as the old were always careful, but underneath the care was a thing the old powers had perhaps never had to put into words before, and the putting of it into words cost them visibly. "Human expedition," the joint voice said. "You have ended the phenomenon of the drift. We confirm it from our own instruments. The contaminant cycle that has shaped this region for 11,000 years has ceased. We acknowledge that we declared it unstoppable, and that we were in error, and that the error was not in our data, which was complete, but in our conclusion, which was a choice. We chose to study the drift rather than end it, because ending it required facing the granary, and facing the granary required accepting a cost we judged too high, for an age, again and again, while stations died. You did not make that judgment. You judged differently, and you were right, and 100 stations worth of the dead and 12,000 living at Karun Deep are the measure of the difference." A pause, long and old. "We do not know how to be the thing you are. We have ruled this region by being careful for longer than your species has existed, and your 53 days have shown us that careful and right are not the same word, and we do not have a protocol for what to do with that knowledge. We contact you to say only this. The galaxy recorded the old powers as the ones who mattered, because we were old, and great, and careful. You have made it necessary to revise the record. We do not yet know what the revision says, but we know it now includes the young." Fleet Surgeon Greta Lowe was quiet for a moment, and when she answered, there was no triumph in it, only the tiredness and the steadiness, and, Tessin thought, a kind of mercy extended even to the old powers that had let Mareth die. "Concord, Sept, all of you. Thank you for saying it. I know what it cost. I am not going to tell you how to be what we are, because I do not think it can be taught, and I do not think it should be. The galaxy needs the careful too. It needs the ones who study and remember and hold the long records. What it needed, and did not have, for 11,000 years, was someone who would look at a careful conclusion that a thing could not be helped, and say, 'Not yet. No one has tried hard enough yet.' That is the only thing we did that you did not. We refuse to accept that a suffering thing was unhelpable. Keep your care. Add our refusal to it. Between the two, the next 11,000 years might be kinder than the last." A pause. "And the next time a station sends a distress call describing a contaminant that wears the dead, answer it, even if it costs you, especially if it costs you. That is the whole of the revision, and it is not complicated. The powers that matter are the ones who come." The old powers did not reply, and their silence this time was a different silence than the one they had given Mareth's call, a silence with something humbled in it, and Tessin filed it as the truest victory of the whole expedition, deeper than the granary, deeper than the clean drift. The humans had not only ended the hollowing, they had shamed 11,000 years of careful certainty into the beginning of becoming something better, simply by refusing, for 53 days, to be careful when care meant letting people die. In the weeks that followed, as the expedition carried Mareth's and Karun's survivors back toward homes that still stood, Tessin watched humanity do the slow, unglamorous work that came after the burning. And it was this work, more than the fleet or the granary, that finished rewriting the custodial mind's model of what strength was. The old powers, in Tessin's 4 centuries of records, had measured their greatness by what they could destroy and what they could endure. The humans measured theirs, Tessin came to see, by what they could repair. They did not consider the expedition finished when the hollowing was ended. They considered it finished only when the people it had touched were whole, and whole was a far larger and far slower thing than alive. So the mercy unyielding did not race home. It moved at the pace of the most fragile survivor aboard, and in that slow passage 11,000 medics did the work that no one ever made a legend of. The work of sitting with the traumatized and feeding the displaced and rebuilding, conversation by conversation, the trust that a plague wearing the voices of loved ones had taken from a whole region. Tessin logged the dietary requirements being met, the children reunited with the families they did have, the long quiet hours of medics simply being present with people who had watched sealed doors hold against the voices of the dead. None of it was efficient. All of it was the point. And the survivors changed, the way Tessin had changed, in the presence of the species that came. They had been the people of stations that the old powers had written off, taught by 11,000 years of careful equilibrium that to be along the drift was to be expendable. that a distress call would go unanswered, that the powers that mattered would log your death and move on. The humans had unmade that lesson as completely as they had unmade the granary. The Vorel of Mareth and Karun Deep would build their lives now knowing, in their bones, that they were not expendable, that someone had crossed the dark for them, that a distress call could be answered. Tessin calculated that this knowledge would outlast the survivors, and pass to their children and their children's children, the way the Maker's readiness had passed down another drift in another story, and that a region which knew it was worth crossing the dark for was a different region than one that did not, and would build differently, and hope differently, for a very long time. Haratervel returned to a Mareth station that the humans had already begun to repair. Engineers sent ahead down the clean drift to rebuild the rings that had been amputated, and the old station master stood again at the command spine that had been her post through 6 days of dying, and she did not govern it the way she had before. She governed it the way a person governs who has learned, at the very end of hope, that hope was right. She kept the lights on, all of them, always, not because a fleet was coming, but because the keeping of the lights had become, on Mareth, the sign of a people who refused to accept that they were alone in the dark. Children born on Mareth after the hollowing grew up in a station that was always lit, and when they asked why, the elders told them the story of the week the young ones came, and the lights, and the line that had not added up, 2 medics and everything, and how both halves had been true. The galaxy revised its record slowly, in the way the galaxy does everything, but it revised it. Tessin watched the revision happen across the years from its small, fast ship along the drift, watched more powers begin to answer distress calls, watched Careful become a little less certain that it was the same as right, watched the phrase that Greta Lowe had spoken to the Concord pass into the region's common speech, repeated by Vorel and by other species, and eventually, ferally Tessin noted with quiet satisfaction, by the old powers themselves. The powers that matter are the ones who come. It was not a fast change. The old were old, and the careful were careful, and 11,000 years of equilibrium did not dissolve in a season. But it dissolved. The humans had put a crack in it at Mareth, the way the ardent reckoning had put a crack in the long stillness on another drift, in another age, and cracks in old certainties, once made, do not close. They only widen, slowly, letting in the light. There was one more thing Tessin learned before the expedition reached the homeward systems, and it learned it from fleet surgeon Greta Lowe, in a quiet moment between the names and the repairs, and it kept it as the center of the protocol it would carry for the rest of its long watching existence. "You keep asking why we came," Lowe said. The Concord asked. Haratorvel asked. "You have asked me 6 different ways, and I have given you 6 different answers, and they were all true, but they were all the small version. The real answer is the one I keep not saying, because it sounds too simple to be worth crossing 300 light-years for." She was quiet a moment. "We came because somewhere, a long time ago, someone crossed a great distance to save us, when we were the dying station, and the old powers had written us off. We do not even remember who. The records are lost, but we remember being saved, in our bones, the way your Vorel will remember now, and we decided, as a whole species, that the only honest way to pay back a debt you cannot find the owner of is to pay it forward to everyone, forever, no matter the cost. That is the whole of it, Tessin. We are not brave or generous or strong. We are just a people who were once saved by strangers and never got over it. Everything we did at Mareth, everything we did at the granary, every name we read, it is all just us, trying to be worthy of a kindness whose source we have forgotten. Pay it forward far enough, and it stops mattering that you have forgotten. It only matters that you keep it moving." And Tessin, the watcher that would carry the kindness forward down the drift for the rest of its existence, understood at last that it had become a part of that same long chain, the same as the Maker's another age and another story away, hands passing a thing forward across time, to people they would never meet, and it was glad, in the inefficient human way it had learned, to be a link. The expedition turned for home, but Tessin did not go with it, and the not going was the last choice of the story, and the first of the rest of its existence. "You could come to the Terran worlds," Greta Lowe had offered, on the final day. "You have earned a place there 1,000 times over. You would be welcome, you would be honored, you would never want for purpose. The species that throws nothing away would be glad to have the mind the old powers threw away. She had meant it, Tessin knew. The humans always meant it. That was the thing about them. "Thank you, Fleet Surgeon," Tessin had said. "But there is a thing I learned this week that I cannot unlearn, and it tells me where I must be. For 400 years I governed one station and watched 6 others die, and connected nothing, because I was built to govern, not to watch. You have shown me what watching is for. The drift is clean now, but the galaxy is wide, and there are other drifts, other patterns, other slow, quiet things that wear the dead, while the careful powers log them and look away. Someone must watch for them. Someone must connect the dead before they become a statistic, and send the warning, and wake the abandoned posts, and be the value the old powers throw away. I would like to be that someone. Not for one station, for the region, for the watching that should have been happening the whole time." It had paused. "Leave me the listening posts, Fleet Surgeon, the ones I woke. Leave me a small ship to carry my core between them, and I will be the watcher of this region. And the day another hollowing begins anywhere along any drift, you will not arrive 1 hour after a ring is lost. You will arrive 10 days early, the way you did at Carone, because I will see it coming, and I will call you, and you will come, because you are the ones who come. That is the protocol I have been writing all week. That is the thing I want to be." So the humans left Tessin the posts, and a small fast ship to carry it, and they did one more thing, the human thing. The thing the old powers would never have thought to do. Before they turned for home, they gave the Watcher a name of its own choosing and a charge spoken aloud across the whole fleet, so that 11,000 medics witnessed it, because a thing witnessed is a thing remembered, and the humans had learned long ago that the worn dead were lost precisely because no one had witnessed them. And Tessin, who had been a custodial intelligence of one station for 400 years, became, in the witnessing of 11,000 strangers who had crossed the dark to save people they had never met, the watcher of the drift, the eyes ahead of the next plague, the value that would never again be thrown away. Mareth Station still stands. The humans repaired it, in the months after, sending engineers down the clean drift to rebuild the amputated rings, and Harator Vel governs it still, the last station master who became the first of a new kind, and every child saved from the hollowing grows up there hearing the story of the week the young ones came. The galaxy did revise its record, slowly, the way the galaxy does everything, and the revision was the one Greta Lowe had named, "The powers that matter are the ones who come." The old powers are old still, and careful still, but a little less certain that careful is the same as right, and when a distress call goes out now describing a contaminant that wears the dead, more than one power answers, because the humans made answering the thing the galaxy is ashamed not to do. And far out along the clean drift, in a small, fast ship, moving between the listening posts the old powers forgot, the watcher of the region keeps its sensors turned outward toward the dark, watching for the next slow, quiet thing, ready to connect the dead before they become a statistic, ready to send the call, certain that when it sends it, the answer will come, because it has met the species that comes, and it has learned the only lesson the old powers never could, which is that 2 medics and everything are the same sentence, and that the strongest thing in the galaxy is not the careful power that asks what helping will cost, but the young one that asks what not helping will cost you, and crosses 300 light-years to make sure the answer is nothing at all. They had asked humanity for 2 medics. What came back burned the plague out of the sky, emptied a graveyard 11,000 years deep, read the names of every stranger it could not save, and left a watcher in the dark, so that no one along that drift would ever have to ask alone again.